Yeah. Coach, thank you so very much for being on the warm down pool. I'm excited to talk to you today about life at Bowdoin College, as well as in the Division III swimming and diving world. So again, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. 23 seasons in Brunswick, Maine, beautiful area of the country. We talked a little bit about off air. I got to get up there. I have family in the area, so I feel obligated at this point. Graduated from the University of Maine, then spent time coaching at the Division I level, graduate work at Colorado State, which I think that's a very unique experience, having the opportunity to work with an Olympic gold medalist in Amy Van Dyken, and then moving on to UCLA, getting a chance to work with another Olympic gold medalist, Annette Salmeen, hope I said her name right there, for the United States. Tell me about those experiences as a young coach and getting the chance to work with such incredible talent.
Sure. I went to graduate school thinking I was just going to be there for more physiology and some research, maybe working in a lab or something like that. But I don't know. You just get there, and the swim team had sort of an opening for a volunteer. So I just felt like I wanted to jump in there and see if I could help out in any way possible. And so the first year was great. And then there were a lot of sort of rumors and things about Amy transferring in for my second year. And it was a lot of fun, right? Someone like that certainly can all of a sudden take a really decent, good relay to a great relay. And so we brought a group to nationals, and Amy did her thing, swam lights out, set an American record, brought some attention. I don't know how much was deserved or anything. I just happened to be there. I was fortunate that I also decided after my first summer, I would work at Stanford swim camps. And I had grown up with Jenny Thompson. So she sort of let me in on what she was working on and how she thought about turns and some other things. And I was able to bring some of those ideas back, which I don't know how Jenny felt about it, because then Amy ended up swimming very fast and maybe solved some of her issues with turns and things like that. So if any help, that was probably the only thing that I really helped with. I felt like John Matos, the head coach, did just a great job at letting her be the kind of, fast swimmer that she really is, and didn't, gave her the kind of work that she really wanted to do. So she was very enthusiastic about it. So then I worked Stanford camps again the next summer. I had planned to, when I was finishing up my second year of grad school, I get all the timing of this right. So there was an opening at UCLA, and I connected pretty well with Ross Gary at the Stanford camps, and he recommended me to Cindy Gallagher, and she happened to be in Colorado Springs, the Olympic Training Center, with a group of kids, and she was there with my club coach, Mike Parado. So it all worked out where I could drive 2 hours south. He was in Cindy's ear. I got to have an interview with her there, and and then she had offered me the job a little bit later, and I took it. I'd been to California a few times, but never really spent much time. But I took the job kind of sight unseen. And that was, that is, for a coach who hadn't swum at that level or been around it much, I certainly, my brain was on fire all the time, just trying to keep up, and didn't want to let that group of women down or Cindy down or anything. So I, worked as hard as I could, put in a lot of long hours. Yeah. And it was a lot of fun. There were some great stories, great moments, but it's year-round coaching. It was easy. It was okay for a single guy to be out there and just, get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get to the pool deck, and come home at 10 o'clock at night after making recruiting calls. And just, that was the life. But it was okay. It was familiar, and it was similar to what other assistant coaches were doing. So you just feel like, all right, this is what you do.
I think it's so interesting that back in the day, and I swam, I in the 90s, and I was recruited back then, that the coaches were the grind they had, because you had to go in the office. You had to make the phone calls from there. You weren't calling from your home phone because you didn't want the long distance charges. And whereas technology has made life so much easier for texting recruits, direct messaging, but back in the day, you had to log some serious hours. And if you got a phone call that the swimmer was talkative, man, it was 45 minutes to an hour, and you're sitting there looking at a list of about 7 more people you had to call. And I would hear stories from a lot of coaches about that. And some of them miss it to this day. They would much prefer to call from the office phone and sitting away from their family. But I also know there's a lot of coaches that were like, I want to see my kids. My wife would love to meet with me. But back in those days, it was, you grind. You grind a lot to be an assistant coach, and especially great people to be at. The Stanford swim camps, I worked on one summer as a counselor when I was in college. great experience there. Cindy Gallagher, an unsung legend, I say, in the coaching community as a female head coach at UCLA. And then brought up Mike Parada. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was Jenny's club coach, correct?
Yeah.
And then he goes on, he has an Olympian with Jenny. He's done some great things. And then he's got Reagan Smith, who's a world record holder and everything. Another guy who famous in the club swimming ranks. So elite company to work with there, Coach.
Yeah.
You're leaving UCLA, an opportunity to come back to your home state or region, at least. I know you went to school at Maine with Bowdoin. What really drew you to the school? Because you were going from Division I with UCLA and all the resources to now Division III on the coastline of Maine. So what appealed to you about that?
Yeah, maybe it was just starting to feel like I had met my future wife, and we were talking about a family, and she was from the DC area. So and she was finishing up her PhD. So thinking about coming toward the East Coast again. And it's funny. So Ross, Gary, and I remained pretty close when he was coaching at Stanford and I was at UCLA. So we'd see a lot more of each other. And I think as we talked, I got the feeling like I might appreciate the Division III atmosphere a little bit more. And he had coached in Division III and I as well. So he knew that this job was opening. I knew Charlie, who was here before me, Charlie Butt, who'd been here for 39 years. Everybody kind of knew Charlie. And I guess maybe my perspective was he'll never retire. And then Ross said, no, I think he is. And so he connected me with the athletic director. And so I interviewed for it. And it sounded, coming back to Maine was certainly a comfortable move. Back to the East Coast. My wife's mother was thrilled at the idea of us being closer, and she loved the idea of Maine, sort of some of those family things. And then talking to other coaches and finding out that it's not a step down in coaching. In fact, it could be more challenging because you don't know, right? The talent level is very different, and there can be a wide range. And you're not offering grants for athletics, so you're not going out and picking kids as much or trying to really recruit them. You have to maybe work with more of the kids who can get in and things like that. So it was still going to be a huge challenge, and to figure out how to help. And it's the same thing, just start from wherever you are and try to see how much faster kids can get. And the points on the continuum might be a little bit different, but there's still the improvements, the big thing.
I know, like I said, I swam Division II. My sister swam Division III, loved the experience. And the one thing that I've gotten talking to a lot of D3 coaches is that the athletes that are a part of their program, they want to swim. It's not like they have a scholarship held over their head and they feel like they're obligated. These are individuals that come to college and they are true student athletes. And I've always heard the phrase, I'm a student first, athlete second. And I hate that. What I've seen from the athletes that I've known at Division III level is that they have made that commitment to balance both of those challenges, and they are challenges equally. They are going to be a student athlete. And we've all known kids that maybe they want to focus more on their academics and the athletics, just not their thing. But the athletes that, especially in our sport, when they make a commitment, by and large, they are making a commitment to be the best version of themselves in both the pool and in the classroom. So that's at least been the experience I've had with my friends who have swum there and coaches that I've worked with. When you are looking for that student athlete, what are some of the key attributes, some of the key factors in recruiting an athlete to be a Bowdoin polar bear?
Yeah, so it's a little different. So, maybe people would kind of get that when I was coaching out in California and sort of, I don't know, but around the Stanford program enough. Bill Boomer was there. And so I got to know him pretty well, just through lots of time spent together, just watching things and clinics and things like that. So I'm in that world of approaching technique and how you plan a race. And then, I went to graduate school for exercise physiology. And so understanding and feeling like I have some grasp on how to put the pieces together to maximize our time in the pool. So the kids that I look for are ones who are a little more open-minded. They don't have as much history to kind of unwind coming from a very successful club or age group career. So then they can come in and if I say to some of the kids like, hey, listen, dolphin kicking is the fastest way to go through the water to get from one end toward the other. They'll just say, okay, well, how do I do that? And there's less of I've only ever done this many kicks, or this is how I do it. There's less maybe resistance there. So I look for kids who, I wouldn't say they're green. They just feel like they like to learn maybe. try new things. I used to joke that in a weird way, I was looking around for pretty tall kids. I liked ex or former dancers, like ballet dancers. They need to be in the top 10% of their class, and strong SATs or ACT scores. I like Californians because I liked that they could be at a dual meet, in a high school dual meet, and there could be a woman going 443 in the 500 free, or a man going 423. And so their perspective is that they're not very good and they can have a lot to learn. They kind of have that lay of the land instead of coming from a smaller place and feeling like their champion, Maine isn't as strong. So some of the local kids win things and they just don't have that perspective. And it's not their fault by any means, so reaching out to kids from California, having contacts out there, that helped a little bit. Yeah. But I love the kids who walk in, and I also appreciate kids who ask questions and challenge a little bit. And then they're willing to do some legwork if I'm going to push back. So I have my background and I have books and I've read literature about it, research and things like that. So if I say, well, this is where I'm coming from, what's your evidence? And if it's just, well, that's the way I've always done it, then I win. But maybe I'll go and dig a little deeper. So I like kids, though, who are willing to push back, and then we can try and figure out what's the best way to go together.
I think that's the one thing as a coach I've struggled with, is that I'm a little too old school in my mentality of do as I say and don't question it. Although I've opened up a lot more as of late, because I've realized that there's a lot more curiosity with our athletes, and maybe there always was. I've said it on a couple other shows that athletes have the ability to find information at their fingertips a whole lot easier than when I was an athlete and when I first started out in the sport. And as a coach, I think that's important, that we're able to communicate not just what we want them to do, but why we want them to do it. And I'm making the change. This old dog has some new tricks that he's got to learn, but I'm getting there. You brought up a great name there that you had a chance to work with at Stanford, Bill Boomer. Anybody in the swimming community from the 90s and the 2000s knows who Bill is. Bill's favorite phrase was, you have to change your paradigm. And as a young coach, I'm like, what does paradigm even mean? And so I had to learn that. I had the pleasure of being at the National Age Group Coaches Clinic in Lake Placid with both Bill and Milton Elms. Milt was amazing to draw basically Bill's vision for a lot of things. He was great with talking about body connectivity, and Bill had the perspective that he wasn't from the swimming world. He was a track coach originally, I think at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, and got into swimming. And I think that brings a different perspective that a lot of people push back on. I know that from an age group standpoint, coaches were used to a certain paradigm, mindset, and Bill challenged that. And I think that brought up a great generation of coaches who were able to lock in and learn from him. So you're just name dropping like crazy right now. I love it. Yeah, Mike Parada, Bill Boomer, Cindy Gallagher, Bruce at Colorado State. So this is going to be a fun one. I can't wait to hear more names. But when you have an athlete join your program, you've recruited them, and again, small college, they could be a girl who's 27 in the 50 free. They could be 23 in the 50 free. Who knows? They've made the commitment to be part of Bowdoin College. What are the things that you expect of them in being a part of your program or being a part of the university as a whole?
Yeah. These are things we think about constantly. I love, at a place like this, I sort of talked about it a little bit ago, but there's a lot of demands on their time. The academic world is very intense. It's very engaging, which just means because the classes are a little bit smaller, we have lots of high achieving students just all around and in every single class. So the atmosphere is that where every day you go and the professor knows your name and they're going to ask you what you think, and they don't want to know what the book says. They want you to tell them what you think. You need to have done readings or keep up on things because you might get called on or things like that. So it's very hard to hide in the 12th row or anything and get through that class. So it's just a very engaging, a very intense kind of academic environment. And we always say that's the priority. We will bend and we will do everything we can to support that part of them, their world over there. I want them to have a life in college. I say to some of them, I want them in 2 weeks from tomorrow. I want all the seniors to sit around and know maybe 100 people sitting in that graduating class of 475, because they had a lab with them or were roommates with them or went to Montreal with them or did a research project or things like that, or just used to hang out with them or whatever it is. So having that life, kind of having a full college experience is very important. And then we will find a way to offer a swimming experience that's where you can go faster. We'll get more. What I work on as much as I can is efficiency or density, trying to get as much out of the minutes that we have in the pool. So there's a lot of, I think what they see is the modeling of, I'm not wasting their time. I'm not going to go on and on with meetings. We're going to start on time. The sets are delivered in a very timely way. If I can do anything to build in kind of pre-practice, like a lane assignments or group assignments or how things are going to flow so that we can get the most out of 2 hours, let's say, in any afternoon. I think they see some of that. But yeah, and then just with the program, I think we have a decent history. We're trying to build and just get better and better every year. And so the culture in the program is evolving. I always wanted to go more quickly, and I love it when it's more on the swimming side, but I know where I work. And so we kind of negotiate. I try to let the team year to year. So we have our program, which is the over the years Bowdoin Swimming and Diving program. And then each team, whatever that year is, I let them or I ask them to really set down their own expectations and some goals and things like that. And then we do that early, and then we spend a lot of time talking about those and refining those. And I'm often pushing back when they say things like they want to get third place in the conference. And I need them to understand what that means and try to do the research to understand, if we get fourth and swim lights out, I think we're going to be a pretty happy bus coming home. If we get second, but people didn't swim their best, then, everybody knows that kind of idea. But I try to really hold them to what do they mean, be specific and understand what they're talking about if they're going to set a goal. And then lots of talk about what does that look like day to day. I say, what does that look like to them? Probably more than they ever want to hear it. But I want to know, what does it look like in your lane today on this set? Or, if that guy's late to practice, what does it look like when you go and talk to him, so he's not late again? You roused him out of bed that morning, that kind of thing.
I think accountability is the one thing we're starting to struggle with a little bit more in the coaching world. And again, I sound like I'm not a boomer. I am Gen X, so I hate to sound like one, but back in my day, you had to be on time but at the same time, you've got kids who are running in from classes sometimes, or they're sprinting in from labs. And I think also, like you mentioned, you're talking about what the goals and the expectations are. We call them values here at Cumberland's that we set at the beginning of the year. And it's great to put those down on paper, but you have to apply them every single day. And sometimes you have to remind the athletes that you guys are the ones who set these expectations. This didn't come from me. It didn't come from our assistants. It didn't come from the school. And Bruce Marchanda, who was at Western Kentucky, and now he's with the TAC Titans, Coach Claire Donahue in the Olympics, he had a great saying that was all over their locker room. I stole it from Bruce and thank him to this day for it. He says, do your actions reflect your goals? And I saw that with the Western Kentucky team when we would compete against them. And I had a great conversation with him about it. And I think that holds very true. It's like, you can sit there and write down everything that you want to do. You want to be third at conference. You want to be a national champion. You want to win multiple conference titles individually. But are you doing the things in and out of the pool that are going to help you achieve that? And I also think a lot of times, sometimes athletes get hung up on the goal itself and not the process to get there. I had a coach tell me he had an athlete crying on the pool deck after she just dropped 15 seconds in the 500 freestyle, lifetime best, but it was a second off what her goal time was. And that obsession with a final number and not the realization that you just dropped 15 seconds in the 500. Holy cow. And again, it's changing the paradigm. It's changing the mindset. So I've seen that at university. I'm sure you've seen it a lot, but holding those kids accountable and making sure that their actions, their behaviors. I know when I'll rattle off a set, and I'm sure you've seen it, you've got those kids where you can hear their eyes roll so hard because they know it's going to be hard, or they're not for today. But I think that's something that we as coaches, I think, take for granted and not work on nearly as much. And I know I've talked with a bunch of coaches on this show that's something they're making conscious efforts towards. So talk to me about the training environment at Bowdoin. What are the things that you like to see from your athletes? I know some coaches, they just want that that game face on the whole 2 hours. It's just pounding it out. But then others, I don't want to say it's a party, but they want that to be lively. They want it upbeat. Even if somebody's not particularly practicing well, that the rest of the team is right there to try to lift them up. So talk to me about if I were to come onto your pool deck and have no context of swimming whatsoever, what am I going to see?
Yeah, so recruits ask this a lot. And I don't know, I probably won't know. We'll never know the answer, but I guess we try to do a little bit of a lot of different things that I think are very effective. So, on Mondays for us, it's a very kind of frazzled academic day. We learn to not go mornings on that day because Sunday is always catch up and late. And, on Monday, they're just looking at a long week of classes. So Monday afternoon is very but getting the work done, we'll tend to go endurance and the sets are just kind of, there's not a lot of talking. There's not a lot of, there's some technique work in there, but there's just some swimming and often at a rather moderate pace, trying to hold some standards like stroke counts or, how far you're coming off the walls, things like that. And then on a Wednesday or Tuesday, we'll see hard things. And that's just what we refer to it as, is just hard sets. And that's where I might pull things from, steal things from other coaches and maybe modify it slightly for what we do. And it's really just going to be a hard day. There's going to be some hard things in there. And that's what we talk about a lot, is just doing some of those hard things so that when you get to the end of the season, you're standing behind the blocks. And the hardest thing of the season is not this, 200 breaststroke or on Sunday or whatever it's going to be. And usually more on the anaerobic side, I guess. Wednesday is a lot of stroke technique. We still get a lot of reps in. They don't know it, I think, but it's a stroke day. So they break out into stroke lanes. Again, I really value efficiency. I think that's something these kids like, is they feel like they're going a lot. There's not time sitting around, so they can start thinking about what they'd rather be doing or should be doing, kind of keep them busy. Fridays, though, it's a very fast, loud atmosphere, lots of timed things, short things, lots of races done in any way we can think of. We get pretty creative on those days. Saturdays have a lot of race feel to them. So that's when, we'll get out touch pads, or even in early season, and we may go weird distances. So we may go 75, we may go 65s, we may go all kinds of different things, but they'll get times for them, or they get up on the blocks in heats or in groups and do that. So, a little bit of everything. Mornings, we're often doing equipment. So there's resistance work with cords or parachutes or partners or things like that. Yeah, a little bit of everything, I think.
I know variety is one of the things that has changed a lot in coaching from my days as an athlete and before. I've said it on the show. I was very lucky. I grew up near Mansfield, Ohio, or went to college near there. And that's where Total Performance Incorporated was. So we had power racks before anybody else. I think it was us and Kenyon, and they would come over to our pool to use them. But now you're seeing things like drag socks and parachutes, power towers. You're seeing a lot more equipment being used, and things are a lot more specific. Are you seeing in your coaching that you're incorporating a lot more, I hate to say the word technology, but it's technology, it's advancement in our sport, things that are just outside of the normal swimming back and forth as much as we can kind of thing?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I would say, right. Certainly we've seen, Dave Salo's work was controversial in the way he approached things, but now there's people that are saying that's been a huge influence on them. And maybe they've improved on it a little bit, or just, done their own version of it. And, kids at NC State or Virginia are swimming very fast and doing it very differently than John Urbanchek might have done it, back in the 90s. And many coaches, right? So there's coaches, so the way we get there can be all over the place, but it seems to be trending. I don't know. I think one coach was talking to me at nationals about maybe lamenting this idea that swimming is turning into the social, atmosphere of like, we need to do things more quickly, more in an entertaining way. You don't want to lose their attention, but it may also be the way that the nervous system works and the physiology works better, is to get in this short, powerful sets, do enough reps to really stimulate systems and not overdo it, right? Not dull things down. So workouts have changed, and there's maybe a little more understanding of some, a balance, like a hard set and then some recovery, and not dragging things out so long.
I always thought it was amazing. You brought up, again, Two name drops right in the same sentence there. I love John Urbanchek, Dave Salo. Those are two guys. Dave swam for John at Long Beach State and worked for John. And from a training philosophy, couldn't get much different. But yet they both fed off of each other, and I know Dave, he talks about first, second, third, fourth gears, not much different than the old color chart system. And I had the pleasure of having Jim Richardson, who worked with John at Michigan. I heard him speak this past weekend at the CSEA convention, talking more in depth on how to use the color charts and the test sets. It's something that I've never really, I'm more of a Salo guy than an Urbanchek guy, but I see the contribution, especially from a distance standpoint. Dave will argue that he could make great milers with what he does, and I'm sure he could. I'm not as convinced, but he's got the PhD and I don't. I'm gonna lean towards the guy with the expertise. And I think Dave was really instrumental. And you're right, he was very controversial. Somebody would look at him and go, that's not how you do it. And Ernie McGliska was very much against how Dave did things. I heard him speak about it at the same convention Dave was at the Central States many years ago. I thought, that's going to be awkward later. But I think Dave was able to, and still is, he's still evolving what he does, is able to create a system that engages the athletes and stimulates them physically and mentally. They have to think about things a lot more. As a former miler, I just had to swim back and forth as fast as I could for as long as I could. And that's kind of the mentality I grew up with. But I'm watching coaches now create whole different mentalities. Matt Kredich at the University of Tennessee is another one I've had the pleasure of seeing. Great. Now I'm name dropping too, but it's all good. And just seeing how they're able to be more efficient in their training. I also think that kids' attention spans are a lot shorter now. So a coach I talked to said, and I stole the idea from him. He goes, I have the rule of 2,000. I said, I won't make a set any longer than 2,000 yards, because after that, I'm going to lose them. And they're going to go mind numb. And I've asked, it's like, well, how many rounds do you? He goes, 3, 4. If I go more than 4 rounds of something, I've lost them. By round 5, they're checked out. And I think that's engaged the athletes more. It gets them thinking more about it. It asks the questions. Why are we doing what we're doing? Can you tell us why? And give us the background behind it. And you're allowed, again, you've got the background in exercise physiology. If they come at me and challenge me on that one, I'm going to go, I was going to be a lawyer, so I can tell you legally I can do this. And that's about it. So, but I love hearing coaches in on that.
So we used to recruit, when I was at UCLA, we would recruit from Irvine quite a bit. So yes. I would, frequently, I guess, a number of times go down and just watch practice. What I think Dave understands is more intensity and duration, rather than using the pool as like the walls mean we need to have segments of 25 yards. His team would do these down and back, but it would take them 2 minutes, and there would be a lot of effort and mixed efforts in there, and he would throw in a lot of different skills. So, in a physiology way, it was 2 minutes of heart rate climbing up probably into the 180s, and then trying to do things well, certain skills, somersaults, jumps off the bottom, a couple of butterfly strokes, so this, that, he really was creative about having them do the different skills. But physiologically you could see where, okay, this is a lot like, it's just that it's only down and back and they're doing things very differently. So, that blend, I think he understood what he was getting at, or he does understand what he's getting at physiologically. And then the skills, though, keep the kids engaged, the different way of putting it together.
I think he drew a lot from track and field and looking at how those coaches were working. In his book, Sprint Salo, which when I talked to him at one point, I said, yeah, I got your book early on in coaching. And he just goes, oh, you're the guy who bought the one book. And I'm like, I think more people bought it, Dave.
Yeah, I have one.
And he referenced that. He goes, you're not going to see a marathoner run 10 times what his race distance is in a practice. So why would you have a 100 freestyler do that? And he really pushed the narrative of you have to be efficient with your training. And we're seeing that more, especially as for a lot of times people have smaller facilities. and this is high school, college, club, it doesn't really matter. They got smaller facilities, but they're getting bigger rosters. They've got more kids in the pool. So you really can't have, if you got a 6-lane pool, you can't put 40 people in there and expect them to do repeat 500s a lot because they're going to run over each other. So how do you engage these kids and how do you get them to be efficient with their training? And coaches are finding a way, and I love picking their brains and finding out different ways to achieve the same goal. Because I know how I coach is different than how maybe you coach, and you coach differently than, say, Bill Dorncott at Ohio State, and he coaches differently than Jeff Dugdale at Queen's University of Charlotte. But the ultimate goal is to get our athletes faster, and all of us seem to find our way. And I love the creativity on this. There's not just one way to do things, and that makes it a lot more fun for sure. You guys as a program, you're in the NESCAC, which I'll argue if it's not the toughest Division III conference in the country, it's definitely top 3. I think the UAA and the NCAC would both argue with me on that, and that's fine. But just the talent that has come out of the programs that you guys have in the NESCAC. One of the things I think is unique is you're still one of the few conferences at all levels, because Division I's doing it, where you still have a split conference championship. The women are one week, the men are the next. And I've always been curious, how do you navigate that from a training standpoint when you have to leave with the men? Are you leaving an assistant coach behind? How does that all work out? Because to me, it would be just crazy to put together, but you guys are able to pull it off up in that conference. So walk me through that setup.
Yeah, it's a challenge, I think. I think for most of us, right? So we're actually not fighting for it, but we're trying to defend this idea that we'd like to have a split championship. We think it's the best experience. You know, we're still a little bit strange with 50s. We have 1,000 in our meet. But it's a great, we have 24 on our roster. So it's a big kind of event in a way. There's lots of points scored. Kids who may not, make they wouldn't make an 18-person roster, especially if we weren't swimming some of those events. They can become contributors and play a significant role. So I think but it's probably better. We like it better to have the split weekend. It's a lot of work, but we like it. So we do fight for it. We try to keep it that way. Most of us, as we're doing this, there's also been some discussion about, similar to the NCAA flip-flopping the men and women year to year. I think we and a lot of other coaches feel like, okay, the women go first, maybe needing a little less rest. So if it's 10 days to 2 weeks of rest for the women, then the men are going to get more like 3 weeks going to their meet. And that seems to be more common in combined programs that have a common weekend. Like the men will rest a little bit longer sometimes. So it just works out that well for us. A little bit better. It's scary for most of us, but I think most of us, well, what we might do is have an assistant stay for Saturday morning practice and then come down to the meet wherever it is, or things like that. Depends on, where it is. But certain years I've left the men just by themselves, and they're good. They get it that they have some work to do, and mostly to rest and not to screw around. And it's not the time of the year when we're going to see them, doing dumb things usually. So that works well. And then if we qualify, like this year, we qualified 9 women for nationals. So then we're at the men's meet and they're trying to maybe ramp back up a little bit. So that can be a little more of a challenge, just to inspire them from afar to get some work in. And let's see what we can do just for, 10, 12 days here so that we can rest again for nationals. And that's a big challenge, I think, the NESCAC faces, is how do you swim fast? How do you really taper, make nationals, swim fast at NESCACs, and then try to swim fast again at nationals, even swim faster? That's a puzzle, something we're always struggling with, I think. Some of the coaches seem to have really figured it out. I think we've nailed it a couple of times, but most of the time we're right on our times, but not much faster. So that's a bigger struggle.
You have a lot more faith in your men's team to do what they need to do on their own than a lot of other coaches that are out there, and me included. I think that would terrify me. Not that I don't have good guys. I really do. It's a pleasure to work with them. However, I remember being 18 to 22 years old.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's a little scary. But if you have the leadership to make sure they're being held accountable, there's that word again, accountability, I think that plays a huge role in being able to pull things like that off. And you brought up something else I wanted to talk about. And Division III, I think, has been the masters of this longer than anybody. And I would say I'll put it up against Division I. The Division III National Championships is one of the most ridiculously fast meets in the country. It always has been. Like, people think of it from a standpoint of what's D3, they're not scholarship, it's not that fast of a meet. You've got kids who are using their fifth years at major Division I programs right now from D3. And I remember back in the day of Jim Bourne, and he qualified to the Division I national championship. He actually was, if he wasn't the top seed, he was one of the top three in the 100. And had he not missed his turn, he might have won it coming from Division III. But then you also had Zach Turk, who was at Kenyon, who went on to go to medical school at Michigan, and he anchored their 400 free relay and 200 freestyle relays and was able to compete there. And there's 3 or 4 right now that are going to get an opportunity to contribute. One of the things that, like you said, though, to get to that meet is fast. The transition time from your conference championship to nationals and being able to do the retape or re-rest or however you plan that is so amazing. And we're learning that in the NAIA as we've changed our system now to be more like your qualifying systems at D3. When you have those kids, they're qualified, and I'll probably butcher the young lady's name and I feel bad for it, but one of your swimmers this year, Ella Riccio, did I say that right? Yeah. Ella was 6th in the 50 freestyle, All-American for you guys. Great performance. So she has to go lights out at NESCAC if she wants to get to the meet and win or place real high. And then she's got to turn around and do that. So when you get back onto campus, what's the plan? What's the mindset going forward?
Yeah, we're a little unique. I think every school probably is, has their own story. Just the way our admissions works, we're a little bit kind of a barbell of, we've got a national group that's strong, and then we do have some kids who are, kind of walk-ons, but they're just, they're awesome. So everybody in the team contributes in some way. But the national group, which for the last few years has really, we've been able to build a couple of relays or groups that swim almost all the relays together. And so we don't have separate meetings, but there's little talks here and there to make sure that they're keeping their eye on nationals and understanding just where we're ranked and what kind of times they need to do and how to be ready for that. And then also just to get their mind wrapped around that interval from post NESCACs through, maybe a challenging sort of training few days or a couple weeks in there. We put in some work, we don't go, we're doing in winter break, but just some work in there. I think one of the things I would like, that I envy about most of the other conferences, is that they really can start earlier in the season. And then in December, they can learn a lot about how kids respond to taper, what kind of work or how much, what else they need to do in there. And so it's one of the harder things is we really get one chance at NESCACs to figure out this went well, or you felt really good, 6 days before the meet or whatever it was, so we can make adjustments next season. So not having as many data points makes it a challenge. And we've done well over the years with finally nailing it senior year. So we've had a lot of seniors swim well, swim best times, make nationals for the first time, be a part of a relay, have a big impact. 2019, we had a woman named Sterling Dixon, and she just was different. Maybe it was maybe my lack of insight, and every season's always a little different, just because they get sick, or like she had mono one year and things like that. So things just clicked that senior year. But have developed, maybe as a defense mechanism, but a philosophy that if you can swim fast any one of these years, especially senior year, that's a career making meet. I don't need to see you, we're not going to sacrifice the future for just this one time. So I like the learning. I like being honest with them. I certainly have pretty good experience and have some ideas, but to say that I know anything is no way. I'm classically in the more you learn, the more you're around, the dumber you get. Every year I sit there thinking I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea why that went that way. The mysteries kill me. Those are the ones where you think everything's going well, and then the performance is just different. It could be better, it could be worse, but it's the part where I just can't predict it. I have no, it doesn't happen all the time, but enough of those.
That's the chaos with our job as coaches, that we train all year long for 100th of a second, and we're training for that 9th place to be 8th place, or that 17th to be 16th, and to get these kids second swims. And I told an athlete one time, the first race of any major rest meet, I will sit there for the 5 minutes before the heat started and second guess every single thing we have done the entire previous leading up into it. And I still have that pit in my stomach where it's like, I'm nervous. And the athlete said, well, coach, what happens if you ever don't have that? I said, then I quit the sport. I'm out, because that tells me then I don't care as much as I used to. But you're right. It is the mystery of, did we do enough of this? Did we do enough of that? Did we do too much of this? And you're never going to get it right 100% of the time. And every time I have an athlete who gets upset that they didn't get a lifetime best, every time they splash the water, every time they rested, I have to remind them there's Olympians who've set world records and then gone on and won gold medals that didn't go any faster. So it's perspective of where you are in the season and being understanding that the process is ongoing. And I want them to walk out their senior year knowing that their best performances were right there and then. I had a young lady this year who just graduated for us, hadn't done a lifetime best since her senior year of high school. And she had performed well, but it was like there were no lifetime bests. And she swam the 200, the 500, and the mile. And we were close her sophomore year, and her freshman year, we were way off. Again, I'm learning how to rest athletes, and freshmen are the biggest anomaly of them all because they're brand new to you. Comes into this year and she's like, coach, I'm just going to train. I'm going to focus on all the things I need to do. I'm not going to obsess over those times from high school. If it's to be, it's to be. And I think that with her having that relaxed mindset, it helped so much. And sure enough, she went lifetime best in all three of her events, walked over to me and says, I can graduate now. I did what I needed to do. I got my best time. So I think that's something as a coach, like you said, you're not going to sacrifice gear because you want them to be able to walk away with those PRs or those top performances in their senior year. One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit on with you is the uniqueness of the Division III experience. And you've touched on a lot of the things there with the conferences being split, as well as these are non-scholarship athletes. But the D3 experience and the student athlete experience is incredible. It's very unique. It's different than Division I. It's different than D2. Tell me about how your athletes, when they come to Bowdoin, they know they're not getting a scholarship to swim there, but what is it they want to get out of the experience of being at the Division III level?
Yeah. Again, I think most of the schools seem to be in a similar place, right? Where we're going to get some kids that they want nationals, they want to go there, they want to have that experience. And then we're having other kids who they just don't know what they're getting themselves into. So we'll have every year, we'll have one or two who want to go through the tryout process and they're focused on making the team, right? Like swimming a certain test set that gets them there, connecting enough with the team to make it clear that they'll contribute, be a good person just to have around, someone that the team, wants to have around. And they want to be around this group. And then we'll get 3 weeks into the season and I'll look at them and they look like they're just, a fire hose is in their face and they can't believe how hard it is and things like that. So I think we work a lot at just individually. Maybe we have the room to individually go to kids and help them understand that the process, doing hard things, swimming being the vehicle that helps them down the road, right? So they go to med school and they can stay up a little bit later because it's the hardest thing they've ever done is not studying for 2 hours, 7100s. Putting them into, difficult, just or situations where they lack confidence, but we're trying to build confidence by just asking them to do things that they've never done before. So, it could be a race and it could be a second semester on this weekend in this dual meet, you're going to swim the 200 fly. So how do we start? Let's start working on that. Let's get you there. I know you love the 100, but we're going to race that race. So just finding ways to do it, because when they're done with it, that may not be the race that they're going to do it at conference, but they feel like, all right, look at me, right? I came to college. I didn't know I'd be on a team and I swam a 200 fly. And then even some of the kids, really, there's a lot of the kids who come in and think they're good. I'm usually pretty good at giving them something to cry about and making them feel like they have a lot to learn and can do some really hard things, or there are some challenging things out there. So I don't know, our faculty, I often say that I think our faculty are, one of the reasons that they might gripe about athletics is that they're kind of jealous of that relationship that we have, this 4-year process that we can have with the kids. And it's just starting from freshman year. And if they want to swim for 4 years, just how different are they emotionally and psychologically and physically by the time they finish their career? And that It doesn't matter the starting point. And without that, right, I mean, I think it is a very valid concept that without a grant hanging over your head, and I certainly saw it when I was in Division 1, there's just the angst over, I didn't swim as fast as she did, so I'm going to lose my scholarship, or I'm going to get, half my scholarship taken away. And it never happened. I mean, I worked for a very human coach in Cindy Gallagher, and she probably lost a lot of sleep over those decisions and who to offer what money and things like that. But that definitely is a bit of a game changer. I don't really know how the NIL money will impact some of that, but being here and not just having the kids being in a place like this in all of Division 3, and then they're not doing it for the scholarship, maybe it frees them up a little bit more to take some chances and try new things and not worry so much about getting 100th faster. And they really can just, all right, I'll take a chance and maybe I can go 2 seconds faster in my 100 backstroke,
Athletes from our sport have some of the best time management skills that I have ever seen in my life. When I work with swimmers and I talk with athletes who are outside the sport, they have no concept of time, in that when we get 15 seconds rest as an athlete, that's an eternity sometimes. We cherish those 15 seconds. So when those athletes are out of season for us, mine, I don't know about yours, but mine will go a little stir crazy because their schedule has been disrupted. They don't have to go to practice. They can go sit in the student center and have a latte or hang out with friends a little bit later because they don't have to worry about morning practice. And I've had athletes who it really unnerves them because it's a break from their norm. But when they go off to, like you said, medical school or law school or graduate school, or they go into the workforce, their organization and time management is so far ahead of the non-athlete. I had a young lady just graduate from medical school, and because of swimming, she was able to set her schedule and keep things organized. And she would see classmates just struggling and not know how to balance things properly to make sure that they were taking care of themselves, not just academically, but physically and emotionally. And I think we're very blessed that with our sport being time-based, I think only track and field or cross-country runners are about the only ones from that standpoint can time management. And then wrestlers from a discipline standpoint, that's a whole different universe. I had roommates that I can't even fathom what they end up going through. So I think it's very unique being at a small college, getting that opportunity to know your professors, but also that experience of being an athlete. And I think you're right. I think a lot of professors may have a little bit of jealousy because we get to 4 years with these kids. We get to know them beyond what the papers they write or the few conversations that they have with their professors. So I never really thought of it from that perspective. Probably going to have to be a little nicer to some professors now that I realize that. Yeah. Well, Coach, we have our last section of the show. We call it 650s on the top. This is a this or that situation. Are you ready to play?
I'll try. Sure.
All righty. Would you rather go skydiving or bungee jumping?
Skydiving.
You are in New England, so I got to talk food. It's my favorite thing in the world. Lobster roll or clam chowder?
Lobster roll. But I'm a contrarian here. I prefer the warm sort of Connecticut style, which is, I hope no one's listening.
Love it. Snickers or Milky Way?
Snickers.
In terms of racing, do you prefer your athletes to show that great front half speed, or do you love when they negative split?
I love the negative split.
If you had a chance to be in a movie, would you want to be the hero or the villain?
Probably the villain.
I got to go with you on that. Being the villain, they're more creative. Their backstories are so much more interesting. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
And as a New Englander, Patriots or the Red Sox?
Jeez. Probably Red Sox. Red Sox.
My son goes to school at Emerson College in Boston. He is becoming slowly a Red Sox fan. He grew up in areas where there really weren't professional sports, so he's the Chicago Bears fan, and he's slowly becoming a Red Sox fan. What he's really starting to enjoy is Bruins hockey because we've never lived anywhere with it. He's never seen it before, and he's starting to really get into it. Although getting eliminated in the first round, I now discovered that he's a little bit more of a Bostonian and how he talks about it. So
that was that thing. I grew up, in New England and barely ever saw championships. There were a few here and there, but it was just a lot of heartbreak. And my son, he's a sophomore in college. He's an ice hockey player, but he grew up New England sports where we just kept winning things. And all of us, all the adults were saying, listen, this is not normal. just enjoy it.
I grew up in Northeast Ohio, so being a Cleveland fan of any sort is so darn hard. And my youngest son said the other day, "It's like, Dad, I've only ever seen you cry twice, and one of them was when the Cavaliers won the NBA championship." I said, "Well, the only time I ever saw your grandfather cry is when the Indians blew the Game 7 of the World Series against the Florida Marlins. I didn't even think I saw him cry at my grandfather's funeral." So that's how passionate we are there. Coach, I want to thank you so very much for sitting down and talking with me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to see what Bowdoin does going forward in the NESCAC and the NCAAs. We'll be following you guys along on Instagram and checking things out. And enjoy your summer and good luck with this upcoming season.
Thanks so much, Eric. Good to talk to you.
Good talking to you too.